This is Seeker, a LitRPG serial by Leland Artra, created by text-to-audio technology.
Chapter 12. The Empire's Attention. Aiden's hammer swung down with a satisfying clang, sending sparks dancing into the dimly lit forge. His muscles burned with the effort, but he relished the challenge. Each strike was a step closer to mastery, a proof of his skill. The forge was alive with the hum of magic, the enchanted flames flickering with a life of their own. "Pass me Mike, lad," Eldrick called out, not pausing his work. His voice was a deep rumble, filled with years of experience. Aiden grabbed the tongs from a nearby bench and tossed them to Eldrick with practiced ease. "Catch!" Eldrick caught the tongs. He called Mike, mid-air. "Smooth toss, Aiden." Using the longer tongs, he shoved the spring into the forge to heat. The metal glowed with an otherworldly light, hinting at its magical properties. "Think you're winning this round?" Eldrick's voice cut through the clamor, a grin tugging at his lips as he approached. Aiden looked up, sweat trickling down his forehead. "This axle's putting up a fight, but I reckon I've got it." A streak of red announced Rhea's entry into the forge. Her red and green plumage reflected rainbows of light as she flew around the forge, her chirps and whistles adding to the forge's noises. She perched on a wall hanger, peering critically at Aiden's work. "Not bad, but you could be faster," she chirped, her tone almost teasing. Aiden gave her a glare. The heavy axle he was about to strike shifted in his grip. "I could use a hand. Hold it steady for me?" Eldrick gripped the far end of the axle, holding it as still as granite, shifting it ever so slightly between Aiden's strikes. They fell into a rhythm, Eldrick holding the axle in place while Aiden hammered. There was only a slight pause when Eldrick had to finish the quench on the spring while the axle heated up in flames. "You might out-hammer me one day," Eldrick teased, his eyes twinkling. "Not yet, Dad. Give me a few more years," Aiden shot back, a smirk on his face. Eldrick chuckled as he returned to his work when the straightened axle had been buried in the annealing sands. "Maybe, but remember, lad, strength isn't everything. Wisdom counts, too." Aiden walked over to the half-finished wheel, eyeing it critically. "Too bad this isn't a sword," Aiden joked, wiping his forehead. "We'd be done already." Eldrick chuckled, his laughter a deep rumble. "Aye, but wagon wheels pay better. Besides, not every battle is fought with a blade." Aiden worked on shaping and then securing the steel rim and pins with a final clang of the hammer, marking his success. "Well done, Aiden," Eldrick said, clapping him on the shoulder. "You're getting stronger every day. Just don't forget to use that noggin of yours." Rhea let out a satisfied chirp, fluttering up to perch on a beam. "Not bad for an apprentice," she said, her tone filled with a playful pride. As Aiden returned to the bellows, the sound of approaching hooves caught his attention. A figure emerged from the dusty road, clad in fine silks and rich velvets, his polished boots gleaming in the fading light. Both men looked up as a well-to-do man approached, the setting sun casting a golden hue on his fine silks and polished boots. Leading a magnificent chestnut stallion with a limp, the man's frustration was evident. "Evening, blacksmith," he called out, his tone commanding yet strained. "This beast has thrown a shoe. Can you see to it?" Eldrick wiped his hands on his apron, exchanging a quick, knowing glance with Aiden. "Aye, sir. We'll take care of it. Bring him over here." As the man led his horse closer, Eldrick turned to Aiden. "The wheel can wait, lad. Fetch the shoeing kit." Aiden nodded, giving the wheel pin one last hammer blow before stepping back. "On it," he said, moving briskly to gather the tools. The man scanned the entire smithy critically and then turned his piercing eyes on Eldrick. Examining the master blacksmith up and down, then turned to Aiden. Aiden couldn't explain it, but there was something wrong with the man's presence. He made Aiden afraid, and there was an overwhelming feeling to keep his mouth shut and to keep his eyes down. Aiden pushed the feeling down and finished getting the shoeing kit and gear ready. The man's eyes followed Aiden's movements, his irritation slowly giving way to curiosity. "You train him yourself?" he asked Eldrick. As Aiden turned to the horse, he caught a glint of red from high up in the rafters. Rhea was wedged into the beams of the wood in almost complete black shadows. Only a small touch of her tail feathers were visible, and she was not moving, eyes locked on the well-dressed visitor. Aiden decided not to draw attention to her, as she was clearly afraid of this man too. "Aye," Eldrick replied, taking the horse's reins and examining the hoof. "He's got a knack for it. Quick learner, too." Aiden stepped up with the kit. "Hold him steady, sir," Aiden said to Eldrick, careful to make his tone respectful and not look at the visitor. "This won't take long." The man stepped back and leaned against the doorframe, watching as Aiden and Eldrick worked in unison. The hammer strikes were rhythmic and precise, each one a testament to their skill and coordination. The forge's heat and the smell of coal mingled with the scent of the horse. As Eldrick held the hoof steady, Aiden deftly prepared the new shoe, the teamwork between them seamless. "There, that should do it," Eldrick said, stepping back to admire their handiwork. "As good as new." The man nodded, a hint of a smile playing on his lips. "Thank you, blacksmith, and you, lad." There had been a pause before he'd called Aiden lad, as if he was going to say something else. But he finished with "good work." Eldrick held the reins. "That'll be 10 chera." The man didn't even hesitate at the insane amount Eldrick had asked for. He reached into a belt pouch and tossed a heavy silver coin to Eldrick. As the rider mounted his horse, he cast one last glance at Aiden. "You've got a bright future ahead of you," he said before riding off into the twilight. The man started to turn the horse towards town but stopped staring down the street. His face hardened as he glared towards the town. Aiden heard the creaking of leather as the man's gloved hands tightened on the reins. Something passed over the man, and he glanced around almost nervously. Aiden leaned out and saw a few people who could have gotten the man's attention. But somehow, Aiden just knew it was the figure of Bram buying some bread from Vanya's small stall in front of the bakery. The man turned the horse towards the east and backed the way he'd come. With a quick, brutal kick, the horse leaped into a fast run. Aiden watched him go. Glancing back, Bram was still busy talking to Vanya and hadn't seen the man. Eldrick clapped him on the back. "Told you, didn't I? Keep at it, and one day you'll be the best in the land." Aiden nodded grimly as he picked up the tools and turned back to the smithy. "Thanks, Dad. Let's get back to work." Putting all the tools in the right place, he caught a flicker of movement above. Rhea had emerged from her hiding place and was perched on a beam, her sharp eyes fixed on the front entry. "You didn't like him either," Aiden said. "If you see him again, run for the forest and don't stop until you get to the mountains." Rhea chirped, her voice missing all her usual sarcasm. Aiden froze. That was a perfect description of the feeling he'd gotten from the man. What did he want with Bram? Rhea's head snapped to face him. "He saw Bram?" She whistled softly. Aiden nodded. "Stay here. Don't go far." She made to jump, but paused. "No. Go to Bram after closing and tell him about this man." Rhea chirped, her voice commanding. Before he could ask what she knew, Rhea dove off the beam, and with a few beats, her wings streaked out of the smithy, angling up for the sky. "What was that all about?" Eldrick asked, his voice gruff. Aiden shrugged, his eyes still fixed on the road. "I don't know. Rhea seems on edge about that man. And..." It took him a minute to decide he was right before he finished. "Terrified of that man." "Nobles don't come to Lapidara," Eldrick said, his eyes narrowed. "This one had a Durden reason. God's help us if he comes back." Aiden nodded, his mind still replaying the man's words and actions. He felt a sense of responsibility stirring within him, a need to understand what was happening. "I'm going to go talk to Bram after I finish the wagon wheel," Aiden said, his voice firm. Eldrick nodded, his gaze steady. Bram came from that world. He might know who that was, too. If there's something to worry about, he'd be the one to know. After they'd finished and locked up the smithy, Aiden started towards Bram's shop. He felt a need to understand the mystery surrounding the visitor. He knew he couldn't ignore the unease that had settled over him. He had to know more. The setting sun cast long shadows across the village streets, the air cool and crisp. The sounds of the village were quieter than usual, the evening stillness broken only by the occasional call of a bird or the laughter of children at play. Aiden walked the winding path towards the main village square, across which sat Bram's shop. He barely noticed the people closing up and going home for the day around him as his mind raced with questions. Just as the road turned to the north and the buildings grew to block his view of the forest, he spotted a figure jogging across the fields coming from the forest. It only took a moment before he recognized who it was. Tilda, the town messenger. Except instead of the neat and tidy Tilda he was used to seeing, this Tilda was disheveled, her clothes stained with dirt and sweat. She looked up, her eyes wide with anxiety, her chest heaving as if she'd been running. Her chest never heaved in a way that made no sense. She could run all day. "Aiden," she called, spotting him, her voice urgent and breathless. She sprinted to stand close. "You need to get your dad and meet me at the mayor's house. You won't believe what I've seen." Aiden's heart skipped a beat. Tilda was always a reliable news source, her quick trips between towns giving her a unique perspective on the world. Her urgency was unsettling. "What's wrong?" Aiden asked, his voice laced with concern. Tilda pointed towards the east, her hand trembling slightly. "Soldiers," she whispered, her voice laced with fear. "Lots of them. They're camped between Holden and Lapidara." Aiden's eyes widened. Soldiers in Lapidara. It was unheard of. The village was too remote and insignificant to attract the Empire's attention. "Soldiers?" he repeated, his voice echoing in the quiet air. "Why are they here?" Tilda shook her head. "I don't know, but they look angry and ready for war. They're camped a couple of miles east and turning back all traffic from Holden to here. They thought I was from Holden and told me to go back home. I had to run all the way around them and into the forest to get here without them spotting me. It took me all day because they are patrolling the forest, too." Aiden's mind raced. The rich-looking man had to be with the soldiers. Now, Aiden was sure the man had been looking at Bram. Why would soldiers and that man come here for Bram? Then it hit him, the rubbings of the symbols. Bram had sent those back to the capital to be researched. That had to be the reason. A sense of responsibility welled up within him, a need to protect his village, his friends, and the secrets they had uncovered. He felt a weight settle on his shoulders, a burden he knew he had to bear. "I'll tell Dad to go to the mayor's house." Tilda nodded, and she turned to run into town. Aiden jogged back and told Eldrick what Tilda had said, then ran full speed to Bram's shop.
Want more? Check out reamstories.com/seeker. Thank you for listening to our podcast. Your review would be greatly appreciated as it helps future listeners discover new episodes and supports the algorithms in recommending more content you'll love. Your feedback truly makes a difference. These audio readings are produced with text-to-audio technology to keep costs down. To support producing these with greater quality and frequency, leading to the ability to use voice actors, there are two options. Option 1, and my personal favorite, go to reamstories.com/seeker and follow or subscribe to get early access, participate in the amazing community of listeners and fans, and thus support the writing, editing, and audio production. Or, Option 2, go to patreon.com/LARTRA and become an audio production patron. Subscriptions sustain the serial writing projects and all their associated costs. Again, thank you for listening. I hope you've enjoyed this audio production.